Story 1. The most terrifying night of my life, and the reason I'll never sneak out again. Context. I am male. This takes place when I was around 12 years old and is probably the most terrifying night of my entire life. My name is James. My friend is called Jesse. He's around 4 months older than me, but that's unimportant. It was the year 2016, summer vacation had just started, and I was living my best life on Fallout 4. Jess's distant grandma, that he actually never met, had passed away the week before, and so his parents were out of town. My mom said he could stay with us while his parents sorted things out in their hometown. Jesse was staying in my room with me, which we loved. We had been the best of friends for as long as I can remember, and we still are. So, as all teens or preteens do, we were intent on sleeping as little as possible each and every night. One night, we decided that we were going to sneak out, not for any malicious purposes. For some reason we just liked the thrill of knowing that we had been wandering around my block while my parents were asleep and didn't know we were out. My parents were usually too preoccupied with my older brother and sister since we found out my sister was pregnant. We later found out the baby was my brother's child after my mom had caught them one night having sex in the living room together. Poor little incest baby. It was probably 1, maybe 2 a.m. when Jesse and I finally got out. We went to the local park and just chilled there for a while. That's when we heard something that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think of it. A woman scream, and it didn't sound like it was that far away from where we were. Immediately, I regretted sneaking out and thought we should run back home. But Jesse wanted to investigate. He said he was worried that someone was getting hurt. And so, I reluctantly agreed to search for the source of the scream. We thought the scream came from the other side of this small forest, but we were too afraid to walk through it, and so we walked around the edge of the tree line. That's when we saw a woman crouched over something up ahead. She was facing the other direction, and Jesse called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She stood but didn't turn to face us and didn't respond either. Her hands looked bloody. We slowly moved towards her. "Ma'am, did you scream? Are you all right?" Jesse said, lightly poking her back. She turned to us and vomited up a liquid. It was dark brown and smelled like rusty metal. Even worse, there was something moving inside the vomit, maggots, I think. We just froze. Neither of us had any clue what to do. She looked at us with her gaunt face and cloudy eyes, pushed me with surprising force, and just ran into the forest. That's when we saw a rotten dead deer with bite marks. She had been eating the rotten raw deer, and seemed like she had been tearing it apart with her hands. How this was even possible, I have no clue. We just looked at each other and ran home. We were so scared that we didn't sleep at all that night. Whoever she was, we never saw her again. Never heard any reports of a crazy woman being found living in the forest, nothing. We still don't understand what we saw, but all I can say is I'm thankful she didn't seem to want to harm us.
Story 2. Devil in the ICU. My mom used to work night shift at a hospital before she retired. Years ago, she had a terrifying experience that she recently told me about. During one of her shifts, she had an elderly patient that was in the ICU getting ready to pass. Oftentimes my mom would sit and visit with her patients during her downtime. The woman was crying, so my mom held her hand and asked what was wrong. While still crying, the woman said that he was here for her. She said that he was evil when he was alive, and he's still just as evil now. Confused, my mom asked if the lady was talking about her husband. The woman told my mother her dead husband made her life a living hell and now, on her deathbed, had been in her room for days tormenting her. He told her he was here to take her. She said he had been standing in the corner of the room since she was admitted into the ICU. My mother offered to pray with the woman, which she accepted. The woman eventually passed but had told my mother before she went that she no longer saw her husband and she was able to go in peace. Story 3. Our pretty awesome ghost and her story. My wife and I moved into our old house in New England in summer 2000. We had looked at dozens of houses, but this one just immediately felt like home. Soon after, we invited our good friend James and his husband up for a weekend. Keep James and his husband in mind. We were pretty well into getting our late night party on, playing cards, drinking, smoking in the dining room. Out of the corner of my eye I saw, though the experience was more like perceived very vividly, an older woman with jet black hair sitting next to the old upright piano in the corner. The piano came with the house. We specifically requested that the previous owner include it in the sale because it was so cool, and we didn't have much furniture. It wasn't even slightly scary. In fact, it was just like she was hanging out. I mentioned it to everyone and we laughed it off. Drinking and fun continued through the night. I was never really a ghost believer, and still a skeptic 100%. But the rest of this story makes me really wonder. Several weeks later, we met a neighbor from down the street who lived in the neighborhood for 45 years. "You live in the Muriel King house," she tells us. Muriel was a really interesting lady. She was a famous fashion designer in the 1930s, please Google her, that lived there alone after her husband committed suicide. Very tragic, but she was interesting lady. Very independent and ahead of her time. She traveled all over the world. She was Greek, I think. Greek? I ask. Weird question, but did she have black hair? Yes. She had jet black hair even when she was an old woman. It was very striking. Yep. I got the chills right then. Many weeks later, I met another neighbor from down the street that had lived there for 60 plus years, and he starts telling me about Muriel. She was a famous fashion designer. She designed gowns for Rita Hayworth and all the classic film stars. And she designed costumes for Broadway plays too. Her parties were legendary, he tells me. She used to have all her gay boyfriends from Broadway come up on the train and they'd drink and sing show tunes at the piano in the dining room all night long. Yep. Now, this all could be coincidental, but it just seems too much so. But she must have been an awesome woman. People from around town have given us some of her original drawings and even an unfinished dress she was working on. There haven't been any more Muriel sightings, but shortly after my wife got pregnant, 20 years ago, we both woke up out of a cold sleep at the same time and looked at each other like, WTF? And then our bedroom door slammed hard. We like to think that Muriel wasn't a fan of kids. She never had any of her own. So she was like, later, y'all, I'm outta here. That's my story. Thanks for reading.
Story 4. My Best Friend. My best friend passed away in 2014. I was in school at the time, so I was distraught and didn't know how I would carry on living. To this day, even being married with kids, I'm still feeling like my life is just an epilogue, like my life was paused that day I found out he died. Fair to say, I was gutted. Anyways, I got really into my PC gaming, and I would play Counter-Strike with my other friends that I met on college. And it's funny because thinking back on it, I never felt alone even when it was just me when my friends were all busy. One night, I dreamt about him. He met me at the Spear Pillar, a location from a Pokemon game we both loved, and he hugged me, and it was as if his young self had matured while being 2 to 3 years on the other side. I felt his stubble against my cheek. It was very surreal. Further on, he told me that I need to stop worrying and that he's always with me, be it on the bus, chilling at home, or at college. He said he was always there. Then he said something that quite frankly blew my mind. He mentioned how it's nice of me to keep the spot at the end of my bed clear for him to sit down on, as it's his favorite spot every night. He loves watching me play CSGO, especially with my mates. The conversations made him laugh. He said no matter where I am, he'll find me and keep me company. It's crazy because subconsciously I would always clear my bed, and bearing in mind my room wasn't always the tidiest. As an adult, I've gotten better at being tidy, ha ha ha. I'm so glad to have met him, and even when I'm away on deployment or even putting my kids to bed, I still feel him around, and it makes me feel happy and very nostalgic. In 2017, I got a tattoo dedicated to him too. It was my first ever tattoo. I just miss my friend.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to help support the channel.